In a major step toward patient safety and consumer transparency, the Texas Medical Board is revising its guidance for practitioners in facilities offering services like Botox injections. This after a KXAN investigation. On this week's Inside the Investigation, investigative reporter Arzo Dost explains the new rules for med spas in Texas. Good morning. You're watching Inside the Investigation, and today I'm joined by Arzo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually here.
I know. This is a first, everybody. Arzo is usually from home doing incredible work, but today we get to steal her and have her here. But Arzo, last time we talked about your investigation about Botox and these med spas, you were telling us really how anyone in Texas can be certified to do injectables in the state. But since your first report, there have been changes. Update us.
Well, the biggest change comes from the Texas Medical Board. As you mentioned, anyone in Texas can go through training and be able to start injecting after going to a weekend session training, going to a couple weeks of these sort of trainings that are happening across the state. But it's got to be under the supervision of a medical someone in the medical field. So for instance, a doctor, a physician assistant, an advanced practice registered nurse. And since our investigation, the Texas Medical Board, which oversees doctors, has come up with some clarifications, if you will. So for instance, treatments like Botox or IV hydration clinics that you could go to, those are now classified in more clear definitions of medical things happening. Okay. So they're saying that if you go to get these treatments, the doctor's name, the board license number has to be visible in all treatment areas. It has to be advertised. And anybody treating you should have their credentials. So you know who this person is. What is their background?
And we're going to watch your story now, but what I thought was great about this story was you're hearing from other medical professionals who are concerned. So let's watch that.
It was filed back in November.
Dr. Kelly Green is an ophthalmologist in Marble Falls.
It got referred to Business and Commerce.
And in the last few weeks, she's had her eye on Senate Bill 378, which would prevent barbers, cosmetologists, and estheticians from administering Botox and other injectables unless they're licensed or authorized to give the shots.
I have had patients who've had their eyelid come down from Botox done elsewhere.
Patient safety is why Dr. Green says she co-founded Texas 400. The grassroots group of doctors advocate for patient protection legislation.
It's considered, medical. It's not considered cosmetology. So it's not appropriate for someone with no medical training at all to be doing.
Anyone can get trained to administer Botox in the state as long as it's under the supervision of a medical professional, like a physician assistant, an advanced practice registered nurse, or a doctor serving as a medical director in case there are complications. We previously shared the story of a woman who had a medical emergency in Dublin, north of Austin.
Everyone was just kind of panicking and was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then the EMS and police arrived.
The woman wanted her privacy protected, but told us she fainted after getting a Botox treatment at a shop in town. An EMS report says she had a seizure and was vomiting. The police department launched an investigation into whether or not the injector was practicing medicine without a license. That investigation is ongoing. A spokesperson with the department says it's now working closely with the FDA. Why does Texas need this legislation?
We need to make sure that injury and harm does not occur.
Senator Charles Schwartner, who is also a doctor, refiled the bill this session to give the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation authority to discipline those professionals if something goes wrong.
Whenever you're injecting something, speaking as a surgeon, it's important that the person doing that injecting or doing that cutting knows what they're doing.
Cosmetologists wouldn't be able to do something more invasive than a facial or other, waxing.
Dr. Green says it's time for more oversight.
Some of this is being done in hair salons, boutiques. We'll have a little closet set up in the back where people are getting Botox. It's completely bonkers.
Earlier this month, Senator Shortner's bill was referred to the Senate Business and Commerce Committee. A hearing hasn't been scheduled yet. The Dublin Police Department hopes to be at that hearing to share more of its investigation with lawmakers. We'll keep you posted. At the Capitol, Arzo Dost, KXAN Investigates.
And Arzo, I think I was stuck on the doctor talking about the complications that she's seen from this. Is this common, or are these kind of one-offs that she sees come in?
You know, during our investigation, we looked into complications for months, and we heard about, everything from the droopy eyelid to your face just having paralysis, and then other complications like the one we highlighted in our original report back in May. This was a young woman that had seen a social media post about Botox treatments at the back of a shop in this small town north of Austin called Dublin. And she had gone with a girlfriend. They had started the treatment, and within seconds, she started having dizziness, and she said she felt faint. Well, an EMS report details her having a 5-minute seizure, vomiting. She's okay today, but says that she never thought she would have that kind of experience. And it turns out that incident forced the police department to open an investigation to see, well, what is going on in these shops? And do we need to be concerned about who is administering these injections? That day, the police department tells us there was no medical staff on site. In fact, at the time, the nearest doctor who was supposed to be overseeing all of this was more than 3 hours away in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So the investigation is still ongoing, and investigators are trying to figure out, what kind of background did this injector have, and is she responsible for the outcome that happened to this young lady? And stories like that we heard across the state from Texas. But one of the things is that this is an area where women and men don't want to come out and speak about it,
right,
because of the shame, associated with it. But as Dr. Kelly in this piece said, Dr. Kelly Green, this is happening. She's having to make corrections from patients who are going to have Botox and then coming to her for, remedies.
And it's so important because, I don't know about you, but in my friend group, Botox, that's expensive, and also it's something you have to maintain over time. People usually are going back, and so people sometimes are looking for a deal. And so it is good to know that, this is what you need to be looking out for.
Dr. Kelly Green made a really significant point, and so have lawmakers who have a medical background. This is a medical treatment. If you really want to get it done the right way, go to a place that has medical staff. Or if they don't, make sure they are being supervised by a medical staff. And those are where those rules, transparency rules, come into place. We're starting to see med spas, hydration clinics all over cities and small towns. And one of the key points is just make sure you know who's giving you that treatment.
Right. So what does Dr. Kelly think about the changes that TMB has made on their administrative level?
She said, Dr. Kelly Green says this is a great first step, but what will even make it better, bringing in more oversight. And that's what we're seeing happen at the Capitol after our investigation. Senator Charles Shortner filed Senate Bill 378, which really focuses on barbers, cosmetologists, and estheticians, and provides more oversight and gives their regulatory agency, which is the Texas Department of Regulation and Licensing, more authority to do something if there are complications.
That was one of the questions I had in the story, because you've got the TMB, now we're talking about the TDLR. Did the TMB not have any of that ability or the authority to discipline these folks before?
The Texas Medical Board has oversight over doctors, the medical aspect of it. And so these doctors are supposed to be overseeing the others that are giving these injections. So this does give the TDLR more authority to, go after people who are maybe not doing it the right way.
We can sort of reach the doctors who are supposed to be supervising, but not necessarily these folks that are actually doing the injectables.
And the TMB can issue cease and desist orders, which we covered, but those investigations take a while, and it all goes back down to who is the medical supervisor? Is it a doctor? Is it a physician assistant? Is it an advanced practice registered nurse? They all have their own guidance on this.
So Senator Schwartner has introduced this legislation before. Did he have any insight for you as to why it didn't pass last session?
You know, last session it stalled out after it got through the Senate. It is got a committee hearing. It has been sent to a committee, but it hasn't gotten a hearing yet. He is really hopeful, especially on top of the Texas Medical Board coming out with these new rules. And he said, you know, he feels like the more conversation around it that he's had, and he filed it early this session. So it was filed in November, and he's thinking that it will go farther. And he hopes it does. He said, ultimately, it's about patient safety.
So I'm really curious about the ongoing case out of the city of Dublin. You talked about this before, where it's really this kind of legal gray area. Does the criminal investigation have any legs considering how the law is set up right now?
It could, and that's why the Dublin Police Department is continuing its investigation. When we first reported on the case in May, they were talking to the district attorney's office. Now they got the FDA involved because over the summer, the FDA and CDC were looking into Botox cases that were using, you know, material that were not Botox. So they were looking into counterfeit, cases. So the police department is working with the FDA. They want to be a voice with this law, possible legislation that could be filed, the Senate bill, and they hope to be in Austin to tell lawmakers more about their case.
Arzo, this is so interesting. And if you're someone who has a person in your friend group or you're considering it, this is the article to read, and her reporting is one to watch. So thank you so much for watching us. As always, you can come back on Fridays at 10:30 on YouTube, Facebook, on KXAN.com to watch our Inside the Investigation. Arzo, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.